public, please email planning@gktwp.ca. We'll address the questions during the question period. I'd like a motion for and a seconder for the adoption of planning advisory committee meeting. Mark, Linda, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Is there any disclosure of preliminary interest in general nature thereof? Okay, seeing no hand. Thank you. Just need a motion for a motion and a seconder for the planning advisory committee meeting minutes. And were there any errors or omissions? Okay, so you need a first and a seconder, please. Linda, Angie, thank you very much. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, we'll start with the first application 6.1. It's a severance of B-01-25. It's a new lot, and I'll say it's called the Knapp property. Property on County Road 2 and Hallex Road, concession 1, part lot 36 to 38 in the geographic township of Elizabethtown. Purpose of the application is to sever a 2.25 hectare plus or minus lot with 125 meters of frontage on Hallex Road for rural residential purposes. The severed lots are vacant. The second severed lands are vacant. It's to retain 212 hectare lot with 1125 meter frontage on County Road 2 and 1200 meter frontage on Hallex Road. Retained lands are vacant. The official plan, United Counties, Legion Grenville. The severed is rural land and mineral aggregate resources, sand and gravel resources. Retained rural lands and mineral aggregate resources, sand and gravel resources. The township official plan. The severed is rural, constrained significant woodlands, water course, and permanently wet areas. The retained is rural, mineral resource, mineral aggregate, and mineral resource, mineral, constrained significant woodlands, water courses, and permanently wet areas. The township zoning bylaw 1321, the severed lands are zoned RU and the retained lands are RU. Michael, you want to speak on this? Would you speak on the provincial plan?
Yes, so both just to talk about the PPS and county's official plan, both those plans identify the lands as rural land as mentioned. Portions of the property are also within the mineral aggregate resource designation. The applicant has provided an aggregate assessment with several test pits throughout the property, identifying that no suitable aggregate resources were found on the property. Due to the limited amount of aggregate material on the property, the site would not be a candidate for aggregate extraction. So from staff's review of relevant policy, staff is of the opinion that the proposal conforms with the PPS and the county's official plan. Regarding township policies, the proposed severance is within the rural and mineral resource limits designation. The lot creation limit set out by the federal plan makes the subject property eligible for the proposed lot. As mentioned, to support the application, an aggregate impact assessment was requested. The assessment indicates that there is no viable material present and that a mineral resource use would not be feasible. There are significant woodlands located on the lands. An environmental impact study was submitted and concludes that the proposed severance and residential development will not result in negative impacts on the site, provided that the recommendations and mitigation measures of the EIS are followed. As mentioned, the lands are zoned rural. The proposed severance meets the minimum lot size, minimum frontage, and all other zoning regulations of the rural zone. The township's public works manager has confirmed that there are no concerns with proposed access onto Hallex Road, and their building staff have confirmed there is no concerns regarding their septic review. Additionally, the CRCA have commented that they have no objection for the proposal and asked for clarifications and updated mapping, as the EIS showed 3 proposed new lots, while the proposal today is for 1 new lot. CRCA staff also stated that further development on the property would likely require a supplementary EIS. So based on the comments, staff would like to provide the following recommended conditions for the committee's consideration: that a cash and lieu park land contribution be paid to the township, that road widening along the frontage of Hallex Road take place for the severed and retained lands, that new entrance permits be applied for and issued for any existing entrances, that the owners enter into a development agreement with the township to address the recommendations and mitigation measures of the supporting EIS, and that $700 would be to the township to initiate this agreement. That the balance of any taxes be paid to the municipality, and that all conditions be fulfilled at the applicant's expense. This concludes staff's comments.
Okay, thanks. Did you, just for my hearing there, did you say that the applicant is only applying for 1/7?
Yes.
And where the, application to consent said 3?
No, sorry, the EIS to support the application was originally for 3 lots, but the application that was submitted to the counties is only for 1.
Okay, good. Just want to get clarification on this. No one's here to speak on.
No.
Oh,
Have the applicant here to speak.
okay, you're Mr. Knapp, is it Knapp, you say?
Yes.
Is there anything you'd like to add, clarify, or anything?
Not
Before I
really,
leave the committee?
not really, as Michael mentioned, we have in mind 3 severances, 3 lots. But at this time, we apply only for 1 to see how this is going. And if everything is going well, eventually, by the end of the year, we may apply for another severance. But right now, I'm happy if this is approved, the first one.
Okay. Any questions? Yep.
Right. Well, a couple of comments. First of all, Talix Road West. There's northeast, south, and west. And they all have a different series of blue numbers, so
Sure. I can clarify that.
that needs to be distinguished. I did have a question about the 3 severances that was mentioned in the environmental impact study. You mentioned the road report and Cataract Way as well, the health unit. I didn't see that in these notes. Is there a different version?
Sorry, if
The,
asking for CRCA comments.
yeah,
The comments that the CRCA is working on, I believe we haven't received the official comments from
Okay.
them yet. There's still just been discussion between the applicant and the CRCA for the clarification for the change between the 3 lot severance that's apparent in the EIS versus the 1 lot that's actually being requested.
okay.
So there were some mapping clarifications and a couple other questions.
Okay, because I live in that area and the swamp that's there, and I guess my biggest concern with all this is the issue of the species at risk that are mentioned in the environmental impact study and these conditions that need to be met
Mhm.
on it. Who enforces that? Like, who's going to make sure that if trees aren't taken down that shouldn't be taken down? Or that will impact the endangered species.
So through the process, the development agreement is registered on title, so it's an agreement between the township and the landowner. It is the responsibility of the landowner to ensure that all the condition and mitigation measures are followed. If any measures or recommendations are not followed, we would be likely be passing that to our bylaw services and working with Frontenac to have things or any issues resolved.
So nobody goes in and checks if they are doing that.
My understanding is that there's no monitoring requirements during the process of development.
That's scary. My other concern is that swamp area. There, I'm sure the roads made you aware that at least twice a year, if not more, they're digging it out for the beavers. They like to block that culvert up. And as well as that catches all the runoff from the balance of the 400 acres or 500 acres. That waterway goes into the Jones Creek, which is protected federally. So any contamination that would happen into that swamp area, either through a septic overflow or even, I can't imagine living next to a swamp like that just because of the mosquitoes. You know, and that's why you've got a back population here. Any pesticides going into that it just, to me, with the size of that property and the layout of that property, it would make so much more sense to put it out on Highway 2 where they could hook up to the city water. rather than have to go into a sensitive area of a wetland and possibly have any impact on that. And most of that area is all rocky. Anyway, so just drilling a well is gonna be difficult, put it that way. Septic systems are gonna be difficult, just on the topography of that area.
I'm sorry, was there a question that I can answer there? I understand some of the difficulties with, you know, the size of the property and the terrain and the natural heritage features. We have policies in our official plan that usually encourage all severances to be off of township roads versus county roads. I think those are policies that are found in the county's official plan as well as the township's official plan. And regarding, you know, septic, we had our building services team do their service report that goes to the county as well, that determines that there is adequate room for a septic system on the property. I don't know if you have any other questions that I can try to answer as well.
No, I think that's about it. I guess what bothers me is there's going to be no oversight on the ecological end. On it, you know, it's going to be complaint driven. And at the end of the day, I mean, you could be impacting the species at risk act. If there isn't proper oversight. And the wrong trees are taken down, i.e. there's butternut trees in that, on that property as well. As well as other, plus there's a rat snake nesting area in that area. So you're gonna have a lot of species at risk right in there, just because of the type of area it is. Whereas at least out on the, along Highway 2, it's open.
Any other questions?
Just, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And you were describing most of Kitley Township when you were describing. But unfortunately, if you have rock, you drill into rock.
Yeah.
And costs more, but you get a well, and septics anymore on that kind of ground, you're gonna have a raised septic bed. That's what you do. I guess just trying to better understand the development agreement. So that's between the current applicant and the township.
Yes.
And if the applicant sells the building lot, because that's what's being created here, then how does that, what happens to that development agreement? Does it follow ownership and all of the obligations under it? Because if we're really talking about serving a lot, the applicant will likely sell the lot and somebody will likely build a house on it. That's when you start getting into the concern about septic, pre-cutting and so on. So I just want to make sure that any restrictions on that agreement follow ownership properly.
Yes, so the development agreements are always registered on title. So they will, if the property is sold, that agreement will be available for the property owner, and they will be also bound to that agreement.
Okay, and as mentioned, obviously, any issues with it are more complaint driven than monitor driven. That's fortunately that's the world we have to live in. Okay.
Jim, have you seen any monitoring in these types of agreements before?
Generally not. No, it is, as Linda mentioned, it's a situation that it's not very much monitoring on it. It's the most monitoring would be when somebody looks at it to buy it, because the agreement will be right there and the lawyer usually will review it and everything else, and the agreement will be there. And it would be a complaint basis that we deal with it by. But unfortunately, that's the best mechanism we have right now. Other than some other things I think we discussed before, like tree cutting bylaws and things like that. But it's really the best mechanism we have available. The idea is that requirements of the EIS will be built into the development agreement. They'll be spelled out to Mr. Knapp, and they will be spelled out to any previous owner. Now, if there is an issue that the conservation authority or somebody becomes aware of M&R with endangered species, then that's another matter, and it's kind of outside of our jurisdiction.
Just again, for me personally, I see the map here, but I don't know where the lot severance is. Like I see the 200 acres, but I don't see the lot that they're talking about, like. When you say it's an Alex Road, but there's no square box indicated.
So on the EIS outlines a larger area around the proposed lot, but then also as part of the report, there's an attachment that includes the application, and the application actually has a map showing exactly where that proposed lot is, which outlines that, 2.25 hectare lots on Alex Road.
So if I can, Henry, if you look on, so that's what I was doing, was looking, so if you look on page 25, you'll see the retained amount, and you'll see in color, I think it is on the attachment here, and you'll see the yellow, right? And then if you go to, obviously, page 26,
Thank you.
on page 26, you'll see the square, and then you'll also see what Linda was talking about, the swampy area, and then the wooded area. So that's on page 26.
Thank you.
Cause I think they don't have it, I can pull it up on the screen.
It should be all right now.
Okay.
What's the square in a retained 200 acres? What's a square block in the middle? By the pond or the water?
On page 2.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like why is there? I'll just stand up if I may and I go to can I ask the owner?
Yeah, sure,
Is that okay?
as long as we hear it.
I just
Yep, we're here.
looking at this. And what's that?
Oh, that's a pond.
A pond.
Yes, you see the black.
Yeah.
area there. And this is actually a different roll number.
A pond is actually a unique number.
It's a different roll number. So the property is composed of 5 roll numbers,
Yeah,
and this is one of them.
but your property is what you're talking is up here, the severance.
The property,
The whole thing,
but
the severance that the 2 acres is up here,
mm,
that your property, because that's Alex Road West. That's Highway 2.
this is not the right.
Maybe you should.
You better bring it up.
You know, the one time different.
I just need.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Charge
No, I
city
think we'll bring up,
property.
Henry,
Yes.
and see.
Thank you for trying.
I don't know, maybe page 25 might show it.
Yeah.
But there,
And I saw the blue in there, like you were talking about, the outline.
Yeah, I saw that too. I assumed that was a pond, so.
So there's that one.
yeah,
And like this is Halleck's Road here, and then this is County Road 2.
okay.
So that square piece would be somewhere in here that you're talking about.
No quarry.
Yeah, if you go back to the
Okay.
beginning of.
Yeah, you're there.
It's a separate property. I'm surprised that, on this map, this looks like a photocopy of a map. I'm surprised it doesn't have the square in there with the road going in. Because this looks pretty precise, this map. I don't want to say it's where the map's from, but I'm surprised it doesn't show that square. So is it a separate process?
Yeah, so it is a separate parcel, I think under different ownership, because it's, I think as you mentioned, isn't it a remnant of a mine or a quarry there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's not separate ownership.
No,
No, well, it was a separate ownership.
What would
Yeah.
If it was a separate ownership, that's a little confusing for me with my experience. Looking at this map, because this map looks very familiar, I'm familiar with. So if there was a separate ownership,
Yeah, I would have to confirm that to our GIS, I'll have to double check, but.
so we don't have a conservation report yet. We don't have to confirm this. To make sure it is a separate ownership.
Now,
Is it a,
in the past, it was probably a different ownership. The history of this land is pretty complex, and Judge Henderson, the member of parliament, was buying the lands around, and he put together all the strips you see there. They belong to Judge Henderson 20, 30 years, 40 years ago. And actually, we bought it from his estate when he passed away 15, 20 years ago. So you see these different round numbers because there was a different ownership. But right now, this is one big parcel, 220 acres. hectares.
Okay.
So this is one ownership right now.
Oh. So now it's one ownership.
Yes.
Oh, that's different than what you said a few minutes ago. Okay, so is the, I guess just experience again, because we had one before, has the quarry been decommissioned?
There is now even a history about this quarry. I'm guessing that. I'm guessing.
But my understanding is the quarry has been decommissioned, but I'd have to pull up that exact information to pull that file up. But, through our mapping, it's not highlighted as a mineral resource use at all. I think it's just a historic remnant of a previous quarry, which probably would have been decommissioned many years ago to the point where we might not have, easily available records to show it. But again, it wasn't flagged during our review process or the county's review process as a constraint to the proposed severance that we're talking about today.
There was no any quarry on the properties in the recent history at least. I'm guessing that this pond is artificial because of the shape. But if you ask around people who live there forever, they don't recall any activities there. So that's my guess, that maybe when they built Highway 401, they simply did a little bit of sand or whatever was needed for Highway 401.
All too common a practice.
Yeah.
Across the province, yep.
The, again, I guess I'll just sort of follow up on making sure our clarification that we understand is that, so following about the trees, again, our experience on the committee here is butternut trees. So I don't know the ramification, but if you cut a butternut tree down, you have to have so many. So because we don't have a forestry thing, we don't look after that. So if somebody wouldn't cut a tree, you wouldn't know if it was cut or not. So we talked about that before, I think maybe 3 or 4 meetings ago. So that's maybe something. Who looks after that, Jim and Michael?
That'd be county.
Would that be something we'd have to bring up to?
I think the Endangered Species Act is the responsibility of the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry. And you see what you're talking about there, Chair, is no different than if I own 100 acres of land. I'm personally liable if I cut a butternut tree because it's a endangered species. So it's no different in this situation that if one is cut, and I'm sure a number are, let's be realistic here. It is against the law because the Endangered Species Act is a law. So it's against the law, and I believe it's the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry that is responsible for the Endangered Species Act. So,
We've had it before, coming before us.
Mhm.
There has been trees cut down, butternut trees.
Yeah.
There's also the federal side too.
yeah, and what you're supposed to do, I believe, if you find a butternut tree, you're supposed to make the authority aware of it, and you might be able to replace it. They'll assess the butternut tree. They'll do a tree assessment, and you might be able to replace, cut it and replace it with butternut trees elsewhere. But there is a process that you have to go through, and there are butternut assessors actually that are qualified to do it. But again, it's no different on this piece of property that Mr. Knapp owns than any other property. Plus, my home that has a butternut tree on it or any other threatening.
So just that, hopefully because I look at this, so we're doing 1 severance, not 3. And then we disregard for clarification, page 21, where it says the purpose of this severance is to sell the severed parcel to generate funds required for conducting necessary studies for a planned subdivision development and the remaining property. So clarification?
That's correct. That's the purpose. The whole property is, as you see, quite large piece of land. And the purpose, actually, 15 years ago or so, I proposed mini farm development. On condominium land farm inside of the property. And that, once I'm successful with this severance, I will submit a proposal for subdivision. But I don't want to talk about the details, but basically, yes, this is the first stage of the plan to get severance and see how it's going to get comments and so on. And in function of that, to propose the subdivision in this area.
So that'll come to us down the road somewhere.
I believe so, no?
Yeah, so again, for today's application, we're going through the due process. If a new application comes forward, which would end up being a subdivision to the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, that would also be accompanied by other applications such as an official plan amendment and rezoning, which through their process would come to the planning advisory committee for comment.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're not, as a group, also agreeing to the subdivision, that's a separate, again.
Yes.
Just clarification, that's all it is, right? Make sure we're all on the same page.
And again, when I read it, we're dealing with one severance.
Yeah.
What might happen down the road,
Yeah.
that's outside our bailiwick until something comes to us.
Want to make sure. Because it is in writing, it's in front of us. Any more questions? Okay, I guess we need a motion for or
I will move, we approve it.
seconder. Angie, all in favor?
I just see one document there, retain 500 acres, and we're talking retain 200 acres, but I see a sign here that says,
Hectare.
pardon me?
200 hectares.
Yep, good, okay, stop, carry on. Got it.
I did the same thing.
I have brain cramp, that's my fault.
No, that's, you read it right, so sometimes it's feet.
I worked
The
in
word says, we think in acres.
Yes.
Okay, but documents are now all hectares.
Supposedly for metric.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry about that.
Sure, no.
Yeah.
Just
Will
before.
we see this again before, when the health unit comes through their report?
Sorry, through the health.
What, the health unit and the Cattle Rockways report, will we see this again, or if we approve it now, is it a done deal?
You would be providing a recommendation from the planning advisory committee for support for this. They would then go to council for their approval before it goes to the county. The comments that come from CRCA Health Unit Agency would typically be circulated at this point if received formally, but would then go straight to the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville for their formal decision and conditions. So you as a group wouldn't see it. We can send it to you as per request once we receive those comments, but it won't be presented in the same format as you're seeing today.
So suppose there's something
Yeah.
negative in those comments.
Then the counties would address that at their stage.
And council is, well,
We
ideally,
have it.
Well,
that
yeah,
report
council.
will come, before it goes to council, that report will be in. So if there's anything negative there, then council will have to deal with those negative comments.
Okay, I guess it's been approved. So Michael, you want to let Mr. Knapp know what the next step are, please?
Sure. So on this meeting, the minutes will be sent to the next following council meeting, which I believe will probably be the first one in March at this point, I'm assuming. Once council has approved the proposal, it will be then sent to the United Counties Leeds and Grenville. They'll also go through their approval process and then give you an answer with conditions that you have to fulfill. After that one.
So can I expect final decision in written in 1 month framework?
I think that's generally the timeframe from a planning advisory committee meeting to information received from the United Counties Leeds and Grenville. Again, depending if some other comments from maybe the CRCA take a bit longer, you can expect roughly about a month, maybe 2 for those comments.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. You will go on to the next one. It's is 6.2, and it's proposed amendment to zoning bylaw 1321 Z-10-24 properties at at Pleasant Lane. Concession 5, part lot 27 and 28, parts 1 to 6. And plan 28 are 15,686. The purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw is to rezone 5 lots totaling approximately 4.27 hectare of land with approximately 366 meters of frontage on Pleasant Lane from rural special exception 2 zones, RU-2 to residential type 2, special exception 2 zone, R2-2. The rezoning will have the effect of allowing semi-detached dwellings to be permitted on the properties. The subject property is located on Foster Hall Road, Pleasant Lane settlement area. The land was previously subject to the consent application, was granted by the consent granting authority of the United Counties Region Grenville. County official plan is rural settlement area, rural lands, official plan designation, rural lands. The zoning is RU-2. The township zoning bylaw 1321, lands are zoned rural special exception 2 zone RU-2. So, Mike, you want to speak on the official plan, the provincial policy statement, and please?
Yes, so as mentioned, the properties are located on Pleasant Lane. There is an attachment that's a bit further in the report that shows the layout of the property. So in total, they're about 4.2 hectares in size. And then more specifically, the individual properties are 0.8 hectares, 0.6, 0.6, 0.6, and then 1.6 hectares in size. And the properties are currently vacant. As mentioned, the proposal is to rezone from RU2 to R2-2 for the purpose of allowing semi-detached dwellings on the 5 properties. This application might look familiar because the committee supported several consent applications for this property previously. And also one consent application was withdrawn for this property. If you look at the attached survey, it shows 6 parts, but in actuality, part 5 and part 6 make up one lot together because the supporting or the submitted EAS did not support that 6/7, hence the application was withdrawn. So a public meeting was held on February 10th with notice being posted on the site and mailed to all property owners within 120 meters. Only the applicants showed up for the public meeting. The application was also circulated to a number of agencies and township staff, and the following comments were received. So there was no objection from the fire chief, from Enbridge Gas, and from the CRCA. And then Public Works had some concerns regarding drainage and entrances, which will be addressed at the time of submitting applications for their entrance permits. So regarding policy, the lands are considered rural areas and rural lands by the PPS. Most of the lands are considered rural areas which support growth and development in consideration of rural characteristics and appropriate service levels. Rural areas should accommodate a range of housing types. Staff have not identified any conflicts with the PPS. The lands are designated rural settlement area and rural lands by the county's official plan. Rural settlement areas support residential intensification, a range of housing choices, provided that local conditions and rural characteristics are maintained. Staff have not identified any conflicts with the county's official plan. The lands are designated settlement area and rural by the township's official plan. Similar to the county's official plan, the settlement area designation, which supports a range of housing options, intensification, and the logical extension of existing development in order to create compact and efficient communities, provided that the development be consistent with the character of the township's villages and hamlets. Staff have not identified any conflicts with the township's official plan. As mentioned, the lands are zoned RU2, and the intent is to go to R2-2 to allow semi-detached dwelling development. Additionally, the proposal will limit each property to only 1 entrance per lot to address the concerns from Public Works, limit entrance width, limit dwelling size on the 3 smaller lots, and provide a minimum lot size to deter further severance of these lots. So based on the proposal, comments received, compliance with applicable policies, staff recommend that the committee recommend that council support the proposed zoning bylaw, and this includes staff's comments.
Thank you. Any questions?
Not a question, but I think, Henry, you and I were both at that public meeting. I don't think anybody else was. I thought they did a really good job explaining their intentions. and how lots 5 and 6 evolved to be just lot 5 and future concepts of that. So I thought they did a really good job. Kind of cleared up any confusion that might have arisen. So I think it's a good project. And we've of course seen it before.
The only question I have, the 5 meters, the driveway, 15 feet, and semi-detached.
So that's
Pretty
included,
small.
yeah, that's included in the draft file amendment after further conversations after the planning, after the public meeting. They're looking to bump that up to 6 meters. And I just need to consult with our public works department to finalize that for the actual bylaw amendment. The concern was to, again, to address the entrances, so it's 1 entrance per lot. The entrance itself, that measurement is only for where it's adjacent to the township road. Looking at preliminary plans, the driveway does open up a bit further into the property to accommodate the 2 driveways for the semi-detached buildings.
So I assume they're building garages, so there'll be 2 garages and, 1 driveway.
It'll probably go like this.
Yeah, it just sort of splits and opens up there.
You know, now is that something that maybe it's not our, not our agenda then, that's building permit then, where they say it has to go so far, or is that?
It'll be part of the entrance permit that is submitted to Public Works to determine exactly where those entrances are located, widths, grades, as well as any additional plans that they require at that point, and then building permits to match up with those drawings for the entrance permits, because a building permit requires an entrance permit to be approved by staff before a building permit can be issued. So it all kind of happens together.
Yeah, 'cause I'm assuming they know what a semi-detached is. Yeah. Any other questions, anything, just clarification? No? Okay, I need a motion and a second. Henry, second, Mark, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Application 6.3. It's a proposed amendment to zoning bylaw 1321, concession 2, part of common. Geographic Township of Elizabethtown, Falls Apple Market, 2934 Second Concession Road. The purpose and effect of rezoning is application to amend the township comprehensive zoning bylaw 1321. On the subject property is described as part common concession 2, Geographic Township of Elizabethtown. The applicant owns 4.8 hectare parcel of land that is currently zoned rural commercial. Special exception 2, CR-2. The CR-2 zone permits an agricultural use apple orchard and a retail store. And the rezoning application would add a microbrewery as a permitted use. A microbrewery is currently operating from the property and produces apple cider with an alcoholic content. The rezoning would permit the microbrewery and allow a tasting facility and retail sales of cider within the existing structure that is also used as a retail store. The subject land is designated rural lands on the official plan. Township plan, the lands are designated rural and schedule 83. And the lands on the township zoning bylaw currently zoned rural, commercial, special exempt CR-2. Jim, you want to speak on this? please?
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the committee, members of the public. In terms of the property, I'll just go back to the surrounding land uses. The lands to the north are forest covered, and the lands further north are used for agricultural purposes. The lands to the south are used as part of the apple orchard and residential purposes. The lands to the west are used for residential purposes. And a large lot further north is forested, or to the west rather. Lands to the east are used for agriculture, being apple orchard, and those are actually in the township of Augusta. So the public meeting was held on January 27th at 6:30 here in the chambers. The applicant was present and there were no other members of the public in attendance. The comments that we received were from Enbridge, our fire chief, the Cataraqui Conservation Authority, and we had a verbal approval from the building inspector regarding the changes to the interior of the building and the septic system. There's no changes rather to the septic system. All those comments were no objective. The chair touched on the provincial policy statement, the OP, and our official plan, and it's recommended that the proposed rezoning conforms with those planning documents. In terms of discussion, the orchard is considered an agriculture use, and the microbrewery can be considered an on-farm diversified use as envisioned by the PPS and both official plans, the counties and ours. As a microbrewery is not listed as a permitted use in the CR-2 zone, which is currently on the property, the amendment has been applied for and it's been reviewed as mentioned above. The operation of the microbrewery will be enclosed within the existing structures and no negative impacts are anticipated to result from the proposed rezoning. It's recommended that the Planning Advisory Committee approves of the proposed rezoning and recommends so to the county or to our council. The draft zoning bylaw amendment is there for anybody to have a look at and any questions on. But again, the thrust of the zoning bylaw is that the microbrewery will be added as an additional permitted use to the existing zoning on the property. And I do see that representatives of the applicant or the applicants are online, Mr. Chair, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hall, I'm not sure, hopefully you can hear us. Is there any questions or clarification or things you'd like to add before I give it to the committee?
I have no questions at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from?
Great project.
Good.
Okay, so we'll have a first and a second.
Pardon me?
Are you the first and a second?
I'll move it, just.
Okay,
Yeah.
second.
Good idea.
Okay, Angie, all in favor? Thank you. All right, thank you very much. I'll have Jim just explain it to you, Mr. Hall, what the next steps are in the process. Just before you sign off.
Hi, Kyle. I hope you can hear me. So once the committee has now recommended approval of the zoning amendment to council, that will go to our council along with the zoning bylaw and the recommendation, the next council meeting for consideration of passage of the zoning bylaw by our council. There will be a notice of passage put out if council passes the bylaw within 15 days of the passage, and there will be an appeal period on that of 20 days. So within approximately, I'm going to say 30 days at the most, the bylaw would be approved and enforced in effect. And you will be given notification of that along the way. And once it's in force in effect, we'll send you a letter with the bylaw attached to let you know that. We can talk about that anytime you want, Kyle, or if you have any questions on the what's required for the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, you can give me a call there as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. Good night.
Thank you.
Here. Okay, we'll go on to the land division decisions. The first one is on the Sparrow property, the lot addition. The next one is the Bass property, new lot. At concession 6, part lot 7. The next one after that is the Bruger property, a new lot, concession 6, part lot 37. And the next one is the Hartfield Howard property, new lot, concession 11, part lot 21. Is there any questions or anything on that? I just jotted this down, but I just remembered. We haven't had a meeting since December. Did we, maybe it hasn't came forward yet, but I thought something was mentioned about 291, 293, County Road 29. Did something come on that?
I don't remember the exact dates, but the official plan for those properties was approved by the counties. I think it was early this year, early January.
I remember our last meeting, you mentioned something that didn't get to us. I think I go by memory.
Yeah, I have to double check the dates, but I'm pretty sure it was county approval in early January for those amendments.
Oh.
And I think at this stage, before any development happens, it's the applicant looking to apply for a site plan application before next steps.
Okay, I wasn't sure. But okay. I have a motion, and seconder for receive and file of these. Linda? Angie, all in favor? Thanks. Okay, is there, any other business?
Just a question.
Mhm.
The first application, should it have come to us with the response from the Conservation Authority? Because I mean, that was kind of, we were questioning about that. So how do we avoid having to go through those questions with sort of that unknown in the future?
Typically, and in a perfect world, we usually get CRCA comments before we have a planning advisory committee meeting. I think in this instance, because it was already scheduled, and the information sent to you and it put out the agenda, and there was still some back and forth on the questions about the EIS and updates on the mapping. Those comments didn't quite come in. But again, my understanding is that the purpose of the planning advisory committee is to address it from the township's policy perspective. And if the CRCA does have issues, they can be circulated to the planning advisory committee, but ultimately they go to the consent granting authority at the county's level. And if there are any issues brought up by the CRCA, those will be dealt with in correspondence between the applicant and the county. And usually, unless the township's also involved, that communication usually isn't necessary to have a township decision.
I mean, normally we do have
Yes.
those reports and life goes on. Just this is one of those cases where we didn't, so it caused us to ask a lot of questions that we probably wouldn't have needed to ask if we had seen that report. Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes we decide also not to hold up planning advisory committee meetings based on those comments, because we know we usually get them in between when the agenda is posted and when the meeting is held in that 1 week span. And if we held off, we would just be moving our meetings 1 month later, and it might be problematic for applicants as well.
Yeah, I sort of, I understand, because it is, you're making a decision, and there could be something there, and something's gonna happen in the future, and maybe something in the future might have been addressed here, or concerns, right? And I think we also, at the committee, I like to use the word advisory, and we try to look at environment. You look on the website, even environment built.
Mhm.
So I think that's environment. So anyways, yeah, that was the question. So okay, there's no other questions. Our next meeting is March 20th. Sarah, did anybody have anything, any questions or anything else? No, okay, thank you. So I have a motion for adjournment and a second. Henry? Linda, okay, I declare the meeting adjourned.
Sure. Sorry. You have a question?